Hello and welcome to another edition of Make It Make Sense with Mike and Marie. Of course, I'm Michael Ayala. Thank you so much for joining me today on the show. And also with me, as always, Marie Pereira. Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me, as always, on the show.
Good to see you too. Have you been behaving yourself?
I have been behaving. I've been very, very busy. This week was back to school. And today actually is my son's birthday. So we're going to have a little celebration for him today, but we'll do a bigger thing tomorrow with some friends and a dinner and all
Which
this
son?
other stuff.
I know you have more
My
than
youngest,
one.
Nico. He's 16 today. And he hated it. This morning, we were, showering him with love. And he was we're like, sweet 16. And he was just like, oh, sweet 16. I'm not sweet. What do you do for a boy? It's like my wife and I were talking. It's like, there's not enough for boys at 16. What do you do? We did something for him at 13 as if it was a passage into manhood, right? Because that's kind of a tradition. And it was really nice. We did a beautiful thing. And then, but at 16, there's not much. A boy, you just, kind of, hey, all right, get out of here, do your thing.
Give him cash and freedom.
That Xbox cards, cash, and freedom. That's basically, and that, you know what? If you asked him the three things he would want, he would say exactly that. He loves his freedom.
I know them, young and old.
Yeah. Look at you. Look at you. All right. Today we're going to discuss a few things. We'll talk a little bit about Nolan Wells. What I really want to address with Nolan Wells is we keep hearing as this investigation goes on, I have no idea where they are in the investigation in terms of at what point they'll begin presenting this, or have they done little bits and pieces of presenting this to the grand jury. But I want to talk about what evidence we know exists, and if presented to a grand jury, what will it bring in terms of charges? Again, there are lower evidentiary standards, so things that may not be allowed in regular court will be allowed in the grand jury. So there's that. And then it's a very low standard, just really probable cause, and so not a very high standard. This process, again, as we said many times, completely controlled by prosecutors. They decide what they're going to bring. There's no judge, just grand jurors, and they can bring and put in front of them what they want to, frame it the way they want to, and they have a tremendous amount of control. So all that being said, I want to start with what has been called that seismic piece of evidence. And we'll decide whether it's actually a piece of evidence and what is evidence of. And that's that 911, well, I'm not going to call it 911 call. It's a CETO call. Mm-hmm. They're having issues with the boat. They wanted to get somebody to come and tow them, so they called CETO. And during that tape, we know that an audio engineer split the tracks. And on one of the separate tracks, we hear a number of things, including what is purported to be a woman saying, "Oh my God, is he dead? Nolan, wake up." You hear the name Bart, apparently. And then you hear, "Oh, he's dead." And they're like, "Wake up, Nolan, wake up." So there's all this sort of, very frantic kind of stuff going on, allegedly in the back. All right, so Marie, I want to begin with the tape, that seismic piece of evidence involving that CETO call. And the tracks were separated by an audio engineer, not affiliated with the case in any way, decided to do it on her own, came up with these two tracks. The Crump family and Ben Crump have their own expert testing it. I would hope and imagine that the Mississippi DA and Mississippi authorities have their expert. I know Nancy Grace the other day on her show had one of her tech engineers separate the tracks. She kind of heard the same thing. So again, we can't authenticate it on our own, but we're hearing a lot of different people have tried to do it and have authenticated it. So when you go to the grand jury, there are issues, but basically admissibility is not a big one because there are relaxed rules of evidence. But when we get to trial, for instance, there may be a question of admissibility of a tape like that. So talk to me about one of the problems that may come up, and it's hearsay. It's not actually the people saying it themselves. It's a tape of them saying it. So it would be considered hearsay. I think it's fair to say it would be admitted for the truth of the matter that's being asserted on the tape, not for some other reason. So there'd have to be some other way to get it in. So what do you think? Do you think it would be ultimately admissible?
It may be admissible. And when you say seismic, it depends on how much we believe the authenticity of the tape. Because like you said, several people have looked at it, But the only person whose word is going to really matter is the expert that the state hires to authenticate the tape and break down the sounds that we think we are hearing. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, like you said, there are hearsay exceptions, right? You could say maybe there are statements against self-interest. You could say there are spontaneous statements when a person didn't have time to formulate a lie, right? There are a few exceptions, but I would imagine that the defense attorney would be tenaciously arguing to keep that tape out. If it's authenticated, it could be problematic for whoever at the end of the day the grand jury indicts and tries to hold responsible for this homicide, if they indict anyone at all.
That's the big question. That's what we're going to try to determine here, if there's enough evidence to even do that. And I agree. I mean, you have a couple of hearsay exceptions: present sense and impression, excited utterance. You referred to those. So I don't think hearsay would be a major issue. Authentication. Now, I want to be clear. They're not going to authenticate the tape that the audio engineer had. Everyone who's going to be testing it is going to get their own copy from that Marine division, and they'll get their own expert to do it. And, you know, if you're the defense, like you said, you may challenge the process used. You may challenge the actual authentication, whether it was done properly. You may challenge that, but let's assume that they get past that hurdle. The other hurdle that I think, and this is probably the one that I think could cause the most problems. There have been quite a few people who hear different things on that tape. Not everyone is hearing what I think I heard, and I think you and I talked. We both feel like we heard, you know, "Wake up, Nolan, is he dead?" We thought we heard those things, but people are saying it's not that clear. So if in fact you argue to a judge under Rule 404 that it's more prejudicial than probative, that the words aren't clear enough. So I think you could make that argument and say, look, Judge, I think the prejudicial effect of this tape is much stronger than its probative value. You should not let it in. What do you think?
I think at the end, the judge is going to listen to it too, right? As a person, a human being with a brain. And then they're going to determine the relevance of it to prove the elements of the crime. And they're going to look at the totality of the circumstances. It's going to be very hard for them to ban the evidence entirely if, according to the judge's professional opinion, it's relevant and there is a semblance of what the people are saying to what the people who are describing the words with their professional background are saying. So the judge might say, this is too relevant to the case to completely omit it. The judge may give the jury some instructions about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think the judge would say no completely, because it is an issue for the trier of fact to assess the evidence from all lenses. And if it doesn't sound like it, let the jury decide and let you bring in your expert to say why it's not what we think it says. And I'll bring my expert, and it'll be a battle of the experts, and it'll be a project in the deliberation room for the jurors to decide.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That if reasonable minds can differ as to what's on the tape, and I think if you authenticate the tape, you give it to the jury and let them try to figure it out. You may have a couple of jurors who don't hear the same things, and they'll just have to sort of deliberate that and figure out where it lands. But my question for you is, you said the judge will find it's relevant. Relevance what? What does that tape actually prove? And here's the thing. When I listen to that, go ahead.
If it's authentic, right?
Yes.
The tape proves, if we're believing what we are hearing, that Nolan made it back to the boat. And they are all saying that he never made it back to the boat, that he stayed back with the girl. And the young lady said, nope, he told me he's going back. So if he went back and you're talking about him like his physical body is on the boat, and you're talking about him being in some physical demise and experiencing some health situation because you're saying, is he dead? If we believe that's what is being said, then there is some shenanigans and malfeasance at play. Because
is there though?
Him then?
Is there?
Yes,
well, I guess
of
maybe.
Course.
What? Because let's go through this. All we hear on the tape is, oh my God, is he okay? Wake up, Nolan. Is he dead? That type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing being said about what got him into that situation. We don't know if it was the result of somebody hitting him,
Okay.
somebody pushing him and it was an accident, or he was trying to swim and ended up, getting hit by another. Who knows what could have happened to put him in that position? Without that knowledge, what does it actually prove other than, you're right, if there's someone on that boat who lied to police about him not being on the boat,
Mm-hmm.
there could be a charge of lying to police, obstruction of justice, something along that line. But in terms of something happening to Nolan, I'm not sure it proves anything that you can prove. Again, I want to be clear. When you go to court, it's not so much what you can objectively say, okay, clearly something happened to him, right? But can you prove? What can you prove happened to Nolan?
Well, we can prove that somebody or everybody threw him overboard because they didn't find him dead on the boat. They found him washed up ashore. So you cannot, if they believe he was on the boat, because there's a lot of circumstantial bricks to be put together, even for the charges, right? This is not an easy slam dunk situation. If you can prove that he didn't stay back with the girl and he made it back, why did you prove that? Because we authenticated the tape and we believe the person was speaking about Nolan and his well-being. If we believe that part, then we must believe somebody threw his body overboard because he wasn't found on the boat. Right?
Now, I would agree with that. I don't know if it proves that, but I would agree it's close to proving it. But let me ask you this.
Michael, make it make sense.
Okay.
If we believe, let's do the math, right?
Yeah.
The logic math.
Yeah.
If we believe he didn't stay with the young lady and he came back to the boat, and then we have to also believe that the person on the boat who was frantically saying, Nolan, are you okay? Places him on the boat. Once we believe those two facts, and then we find his body washed up, it makes sense that a person physically picked up his body, whether dead, alive, or they caused what caused him to be dead or alive, dumped him in the water. Can we believe that much? Stop being a lawyer here.
Listen, I'm going to play the defense attorney. Have you ever seen someone who passes out from drinking or from drugs, and then maybe 30 minutes later, 20 minutes later, they pop up. They pop up and they've got this surge of energy. What happened? Where am I? And what if that happened to Nolan? What if he pops up and he doesn't know where he is? He's freaking out. He runs, falls over the boat. They don't know what to do.
And then they proceed to lie and say he never made it on the boat. That at the very least.
Now that is the part where you're afraid. You're afraid that if you say the truth, you find yourself in hot water. So you decide that that's not what you're going to say. Again, I'm just throwing these out there as a defense attorney. When I'm thinking about how I'm going to tell this jury and get this really bad fact and say, look, beyond a reasonable doubt, can we really believe that this was a result of them throwing him in the water? Because all these other things could have happened that could explain what happened. And my clients may be guilty of lying, but that's just because they were afraid of police. They're not guilty of any kind of murder, dumping in the water or whatever. So you could obviously, that's why I'm saying, what does it actually prove that you can take to court and prove beyond a reasonable doubt? That's why I'm questioning it.
I've seen people get convicted with those type of facts because it's also when you're lying during an investigation, it is also a consciousness of guilt. Why are you lying and not telling the truth? We've had cases where husbands claim they found their wife on the floor. They were downstairs doing the dishes, came upstairs and their wife was on the floor. And then they panicked and said, oh my God, they're going to blame me. And they go out to Walmart or Home Depot and get saws to cut wives apart. You remember that case, the guy in Boston?
I do.
And it didn't, but all he said is, my wife died. I panicked and I cut up her body. He still
Robert
got
Durst. Robert
convicted.
Durst. Apparently, he got into a fight. It was a self-defense situation. Apparently, allegedly, he ended up deciding to cut up the body because he thought he wouldn't be able to sell the idea that it was self-defense. I don't
Because
believe that story, but he got away with it.
exactly. So at this point, if you believe the voice that was saying, Nolan, are you okay? Then you have to believe that they weren't crazy speaking to air, right? So somehow he ended up washed up ashore, right? And we don't know all of the details of the state autopsy. Maybe they're keeping back something. Maybe the throat they kept and didn't give to Ben Crump's coroner, who was paid by Colin Kaepernick, I heard.
Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe
a bunch of celebrities involved in paying for all this stuff, apparently.
That's right. So maybe they kept the throat structures because they saw maybe his hyoid bone was broken, which is a telltale strangulation situation. There's still a lot that we don't know. And I was on Nancy Grace's show yesterday, and she said, what do you have to add? And I added, we don't know all of the information that has been gathered by the investigatory committee, right? And they don't have to tell us everything they know. So for all we know, they talked to somebody who was on the boat, and that person is snitching on everybody. And that could be their lead witness who's talking to the grand jury as we speak. Yeah. We don't know if they haven't investigated. We don't know if they haven't narrowed down a specific person. It wasn't me. It was Timmy. They had an argument, blah, 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 motive set up and everything. There's so much we don't know that we need to calm down.
Yeah.
And let the people do their job. But keep an eye on them, because I really don't like from the beginning where they popped out to say it was an accident when they didn't even have an autopsy. So it leads me to believe they want to start the investigation, like we said last week, with a vein that nothing happened, which makes evidence collection nothing. Nothing equals nothing. So now that, he has a team of people advocating on his behalf, they'll be very careful to do what they're supposed to do. And I want to be, hopeful that they are. Yeah.
Let me ask you this about the tape.
Mm-hmm.
The tape was split into two tracks. You hear, we think we hear on one side the whole thing about Nolan. The other side, the kid seems relatively calm, I think. And he's calling authorities, or not authorities, but he's calling a company to come and tow their boat.
Right.
So my question is, if I'm a guy and I've got this situation unfolding in my boat, that's potentially not so great with someone who might be dead, why am I calling a third party to come? Why aren't I calling my dad or my uncle who has a boat? Why am I calling this third party that could potentially, and you would know because you're experienced on boats, that the Maritime Division could end up coming as well, which they responded as well. Why am I calling them if I've got this unfolding situation with a dead body or an almost dead body on my boat?
Because we have a boat full of kids who are not criminals, who might have committed a crime accidentally, and they're panicking and it's not well thought out. And maybe they plan to say that he drowned because something happened to him and they wanted to pretend it was, like he drowned. Almost like, you commit a homicide and you put the house on fire and you think they're going to think the person burned up in the fire. When they examine the body, you don't know. They're going to see the person was alive. If you hit them on the head or something, maybe they were trying to cover up a crime. And then it occurred to them, what are we doing? And that's when they were like, okay, never mind. We're fine now. You know what I mean? They're just not smart criminals. We can't.
I was thinking maybe because something happened to Nolan and they were thinking, let's call somebody.
Okay.
And then they realize in the middle of the call, or as he's making the call, I don't need to be making this call.
Exactly.
But the person picks up and then he says, oh, I need a tow. You know what I mean? Like he just kind of, and then he realizes, you know what, this is not the best idea. So, I mean, all those things are certainly in play, right?
Exactly. I mean, there are what we call stupid criminals. And we
Most of them are stupid.
We cannot, equate stupidity with no guilt. You could be guilty and make stupid mistakes, as you're committing your crime that make you get caught. You're not going to say, "Oh, but nothing happened," because why would they call?
Yeah. That had me a little bit sort of weird. All right, so that's the tape, right? I think there are questions. I think there are issues. I think a good defense attorney might be able to work with that tape. But here's the other thing. I would hope and I would imagine, and I'm not sure it's all that easy, so I'm not going to say this has happened for sure, that they know who is talking on that tape. Do they know? Do you think they know who the girl is, who we hear a couple of times saying, "Oh my God," and
Yes.
the person, "Is he dead? Nolan's dead." It could be, I'm not sure it's just one girl. It could be more than one girl.
They know how many people were on that boat. And they will probably have an easy time identifying whose voice it was.
Right.
It's as simple as gathering up all the information about who was on the boat, bringing them in one by one, and having them identify. Was this your voice? Whose voice is this? It has to be somebody's voice. And if nobody's willing to say it was them, and the voice as a human voice is authenticated, then they're lying. And then you separate them and say, listen, if you're lying, that means you knew what happened or you were a part of it. We're going to charge everybody with this.
Yeah. You're going to prison. So
conspiracy.
Either talk to me or, you know what I mean? That I think is going to be the best avenue to trying to figure out what really happened. Is you take that tape, if you can authenticate it, and you realize there were people on that boat who said something to police that was a lie, and you get them in, you charge them, and you begin to scare the bejeebers out of them and see if they'll start talking then at that point. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like you always say, conspiracy is like an octopus and it has long tentacles. It could grab you even if you weren't on the boat. If you knew about it and you helped to do something, you knew there was a crime being planned and you participated in a meaningful way, even absent, they can get you. So never mind if you're on the boat and you're part of the lie, because if there was one girl and the girl said, that wasn't my voice, or two girls, one should be able to tell.
I wonder if they're able to determine that this was something more. I saw a demonstration by this jiu-jitsu guy, and I practice jiu-jitsu as well. And you know that that sort of reddish bruise that was at the back of the neck?
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about the throat being held back. And again, I just want to remind folks, the fact that they held back the throat and they held back the lungs and stomach are really about chain of custody issues. I don't think they were trying to hide anything. And I think, important parts of it, that might be a part of a trial, you don't want to let them start, being out in the world somewhere, because you'll never be able to authenticate chain of custody. So they may have been looking at it closer. Let's say something was going on with the throat. The guy said, there's this headlock that you use, and you go around someone's neck. The back hand is against the back of the head. This goes under the throat, and you choke them out. You put them to sleep. And when he's holding the head, where the back arm goes is literally right across that bottom part that showed some, that reddish mark. And if in fact the throat has some issues to it, it could have been caused by that type of chokehold. And kids use that all the time. You may get in a fight, get in wrestling, and suddenly you got a guy in a chokehold, and you want to put him to sleep or whatever. I see kids do it all the time. It's not something kids don't know how to do. A lot of kids do know how to do it. So I looked at that and I said, wow, that's a possibility of something that happened. He thought he was putting him to sleep, and it turned out to be something worse, maybe.
I mean, it's for them to say he never made it back to the boat. That's problematic if the tape is authenticated and they believe what was said in the tape. That creates a serious problem for everybody on that boat. But let's wait and see. I do believe now that, he has a team of attorneys looking at what the state is doing as far as investigating. The state is not going to mess around and do an incomplete job or a job that tends to negate foul play. They're going to do what they need to do to find the truth. And I want to be optimistic and remain hopeful they'll do that.
So you feel confident about that, huh?
I do that.
Now you do. Now that they've made this sort of big, right, the eyes are all over them, I would have to agree.
Nobody's going to lose their job over that kind of nonsense, because Ben Crump is on it. The whole world is talking about it. We're talking about it. They're going to be like, okay,
Yeah, we're going to do what we have to do. Yeah, we're going to do. You might be right.
That's
The other
all.
thing I want to focus on that might, so we have the tape. We just talked it through. There may or may not be evidence of some crime there. So now we got to start thinking about ways to justify either arrests on something, lying to police or whatever. The report that was filed by the Cajun Navy, they did their own investigation. And this is important. They said that there's a window between 3:23 and 4:27 on July 4th, the day that he disappeared, where they could not corroborate his presence anywhere on the island. So from 3:23 to 4:27, about an hour, no one could verify that they saw Nolan during that period. I think that's significant for a number of reasons. Number one, if you saw a picture of the island, the way it sort of plays out, tons of kids on the island, right? It's a little island. Everybody can kind of see everybody. There's nothing blocking you from seeing what's happening. You may not know it's Nolan, but you can see somebody or whatever. And you mean to tell me with an island like that, no one can tell you that Nolan is there? I think that supports the idea that he might have been back on that boat.
Exactly.
They leave at 4:31, and the only people who would have seen him under those circumstances are the people on the boat, all of them who have a different story now, saying that he wasn't on the boat. The only way no one on the island would have seen him is if he's back at the boat and those guys are lying. I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying that's what this raises the specter of.
I think it does. And when you're not sure of something, then there is something that you can use in the grand jury. It's only, could it have happened? It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So on the point of getting an indictment, that may work in favor of bringing it over to felony court.
So how does that help? The boat that he was supposedly on goes to another house after it's taken out of the water. It's then taken to a house in, I forget the place, Fort Bayou. Mm-hmm. Then it comes back to where it's naturally moored in Biloxi. So there's that sort of travel, raises questions. So you have that suspicious behavior. You also have statements by the girl saying, boom, he was with me, said he was going back to the boat. You have this sort of space between 3:23, 4:27. No one sees him on the island. Is that enough for probable cause? And if it is, probable cause of what? And who do you arrest? Again, I'm struggling with the idea that all these little disparate inconsistencies come together enough, even for the low level of probable cause, to say that something nefarious happened.
But like I said, we don't know the extent of their investigation. We don't know if there are witnesses who were on the boat who are providing clarity and information that they're not sharing.
And if they are, Marie, do you think they would have been arrested already? If somebody came up and already said, look, I just want to tell the truth because I'm tired of this. So-and-so did this, that, and the other thing. Do you think they'd still be waiting, or they would have put that right in front of the grand jury right away and got themselves an arrest? Do you think they're waiting if they have that information?
Yes, I do. I do. Because it seems impossible to me that they would present a case to, well, you said that it's practice in that jurisdiction to present all cases similar to this one to the grand jury, correct?
Yes.
So maybe it's just a matter of going.
I'm talking about timing. Do you think if they had someone who came forward, pointed the finger at someone in particular, do you think they would have then said, okay, let's bring this to the grand jury? Because by doing that, you get somebody indicted, and someone saying something happened, I think is more than enough probable cause to get an indictment. Now, yes. Suddenly, I think the floodgates open. Right? If you get one person on a very serious charge, whatever it may be, they had a fight and grabbed him in a headlock, that may not be, any kind of intentional murder. It could be other things. But you charge them. And I think that opens up the floodgates at that point, right? So wouldn't they expedite?
They would.
Would you, as a former prosecutor, would you expedite it, or would you keep the thing going on a normal pace, making sure you had all your I's dotted and your T's crossed?
I would keep it going on a normal pace, and I would make sure that I had all my I's dotted and my T's crossed. And there could be more information that the coroner is trying to find out with the organs that he kept, particularly the organs that are...
It's complete. It's complete. So they know whatever is on that, and again, we don't know on the toxicology report, whatever's on that ME's report, the autopsy, that's done. That's completed. They were clear on that. So whatever they learned from that, they already know as well.
But they're not sharing it with us, so we don't know what they learned.
Right.
Is something that's not going to be helpful to show that a crime with probable cause was committed. We don't know that. I keep saying we don't know because we don't know. And I think we have to wait until they present their case to the grand jury and the grand jury comes back. Now, if they come back with no true bill, then we can uproar and say why, what was presented. Which,
that's where the problem is going to come in.
Huh?
Marie, at this point, the way this has been handled, and again, every prosecutor's office, you want to handle it that way, that's fine. But considering the attention that this case has gotten, if they come back with a no true bill, is anyone going to believe that they did what they were supposed to do? Because the entire internet, or I'll tell you for sure, the black internet, they believe that a crime was committed here.
Well,
and they're all about getting justice for Nolan. And again, I don't think this is targeted at any particular individual. Again, I'm not even so sure this is about race as much as it is about class and people making sure that the system works for everyone.
Yes.
People saying, oh, you just want to see somebody white put in jail. No, this is about, and not, it's not my crusade, quite frankly. I'm interested in the case. I find it interesting from a legal standpoint, but I think the folks who are out there crusading, it's really just about making sure that a system that has had some historical issues respecting people of color, both in terms of as defendants and as victims, acts in the right way. And whoever it ends up convicting or doesn't convict, then, they can live with that. But I think in this particular case, because they've been so tight-lipped and because there have been some missteps in terms of what has been said to the public, I think if there's no true bill in this case, people are not going to be happy and they're not going to trust what they're hearing.
They're not. And that's what, his attorneys say too. We want justice and we want a thorough investigation, even if the investigation exonerates or puts guilt on the person. We just want the truth is what we want. And hopefully that's the way the investigation will be conducted moving forward. Investigate to find out the truth and be transparent about it.
Yeah, when I think about this case, it's just so hard for me to believe. And again, maybe it's not. Let me not even put my impression out there. But, I think, you start off with this guy saying something that he shouldn't have said. And the DA, when she did her little taped statement, I called it her hostage statement. I mean, there was no warmth, no nothing there. She was just eyes wide open reading a prompter, saying that he shouldn't have said that. The fact that he thought it was an accident, an hour in, and that there was no sign of foul play. She never should have said that. But the fact that he did say it, I think raised people's suspicions and said, oh, they're not going to investigate this thing the way they should because of the optics. They said, oh, it was a black-white thing. But beyond that, it's hard for me to believe that no one would have seen what happened to Nolan. There are people who said to me, bunch of kids on an island, all you're doing is drinking. Everybody's drinking. Apparently, there was some witness reports that Nolan had been drinking as well. He could have wandered off, fallen in the water, and the tide's taken him out, right? So Ben said he's looking into the tides to see if that's possible. I mean, that's not outside completely the realm of possibility.
All they're asking for is for competent investigators to investigate all possible scenarios. If the scenario leads to no crime was committed, then this was a tragic accident, and there are facts to support it, then yes, it could have been a tragic accident. But you can't just turn away from the little pieces that are important, looking at the totality of the circumstances, which just don't make sense. You can't just turn a blind eye to that.
But what do they add up to?
Something happened.
Yeah.
And Nolan is
what can
dead.
you prove? Like, even standing here talking about it, we still can't, again, based on what we know, say, we can all say there's some weird stuff going on here, some unfortunate coincidences, but I can't say what happened. I can't.
You know what? If they all stay strong, even if something happened, it's possible that we may not get justice in this situation.
That's my
That's
point.
a sad, tragic possibility.
Yeah.
Because of all the things you're pointing out. Unless somebody on that boat breaks silence and snitches, it's possible that there were so many of them on the boat, so much chaos going on around, that you could say, well, it was an accident because he never made it back to the boat. That's why that tape is so important. Once you prove he made it back to the boat, then it is sort of like a game changer where they have the burden of explaining what happened to him. But if the tape is not properly authenticated, or the persons are saying, well, we're not sure, because it's the audio that puts him on the boat. If he's never put on the boat, then it could have happened that he wandered off and drowned somehow.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Again, as we talk about it, that's the thing that keeps coming back to. It's just sad. It's just really sad, no matter what happened here, right? I'm I'm struggling to believe that this was some sort of malicious murder. If it happens to be someone was involved and there was something physical, I feel like it probably was just a beef between two boys, drinking, dispute. I don't know. I don't think anybody set out to hurt this young man. I think it might have happened. Probably was accidental. And I don't know why they would think that that wouldn't be something they could come forward and say. But, realistically, maybe they knew it wasn't under the best circumstances. Who knows? Anyway, so I think we're clear. I think it's fair to say, based on what we know, discrepancies, inconsistencies, we're not 100% sure that there's enough there to create probable cause for any particular crime being committed. Even if they authenticate that tape, they can identify the people on board. I think maybe you can certainly arrest them for lying to police if they were the ones, or they told police something that was inconsistent. But other than that, I'm not sure where we go as far as that tape is concerned. All right. So let's move on. I want to talk quickly before we end here today. Actually, I want to get a little TPS update at some point. But first, I want to talk quickly about Lindsay Clancy. She's the woman, the mother, charged with the murder of her 3 children in Massachusetts. She's claiming insanity, toxic mix of medications. She was given tons of medications, a lot of testimony about that yesterday, suffering from postpartum depression, and then eventually became postpartum psychosis, which the defense is claiming was the reason she did this. Now, I think it's fair to say there was an awareness that she was doing something wrong, but she could not conform. According to the law in Massachusetts, Marie, you can either say, I didn't know what I was doing was wrong because of my mental illness, or you can say, I knew it was wrong, but I could not conform to the law based on my mental illness. And I think that's where they need to go. She was hearing voices, apparently. That's her claim, telling her that this was the time for her to do it. We talked to Dr. Debbie Goodman earlier in the week, Judge and I. And it was established by Dr. Goodman, and she's a criminologist, that you can look perfectly normal and be functioning perfectly normal, fall into psychosis, and do something like this. That is not necessarily probative of the fact that, well, if she was feeling fine, 20 minutes before, it's impossible for her to have fallen into psychosis. That's not necessarily the case. She also said something interesting, and I want to get your opinion. She talked about Andrea Yates, killed her children, Susan Smith, killed her children, saying that some people could just be evil. And there was something she called the disposal theory, that criminologists are aware of, that there's just comes a point in your life where you just don't want this particular burden, these particular people, whether they be children, older adults, in your life. And you just want to get rid of them. Susan Smith, for instance, was having an affair. The guy was like, look, I'm not interested in being with you. If you got kids, that's not my thing. So she got rid of the kids. Nothing like that here, but she threw that out there. So I want to get your thoughts on that idea. The fact that there were all these sort of little inklings that, she checked a time to go from the store to how much time she had to do it, apparently. The suicide attempt is being questioned as something that wasn't really a suicide attempt. She was very coherent throughout this whole thing. And then apparently the psychosis hits, and then she's coherent after, asking for a lawyer. We heard testimony a couple of days about that. When they arrived on the scene, she's laying out in the snow. She's asking, get me a lawyer, or do I have a lawyer? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that she was suffering from acute postpartum psychosis. And I think her cases are set apart from the other two cases you just mentioned, because those people did not seek medical attention months prior to the incident. They didn't check themselves into a lockdown facility. They don't have documented contact with mental health specialists. You don't have proof that they were on a series of antipsychotic, antidepressant medications, pharmacy records. So no, it's not a disposable theory situation, because she outcried to people, including her husband, her doctors, nurses, mental health professionals, her friends, and said, I'm not sleeping. And she didn't share with her friends that she was having thoughts of killing herself and her children, but she did share
shared it with Patrick Clancy, her husband, though. She did tell him.
I was going to say, she shared it with her husband, close to her. So them bringing people from the school, the pre-K teachers who said, yeah, she picked the kids up. She looked fine to me. She was a great mom, as if to say, because you're a great mom today and you murder tomorrow means that there was nothing wrong with you. I thought all of the witnesses they brought in from the preschool, who knew the little kids, who knew her, that she was a good mom, her friends, they brought the witnesses in as prosecution witnesses, and the defense was able to cross-examine them and make them out to be character witnesses, really. They spoke to her character, how much she loved her kids, how much the kids loved her. The teachers said the kids never showed any signs of neglect. Matter of fact, the little girl, Cora, when her mom was checked into hospital, was crying for her mom. The little girl was having some gastrointestinal symptoms and was laying on her mat. And Lindsay came and said, oh, come on, baby, let's go. She followed up with all the doctor's appointments. Everything, looking at the totality of the circumstances, supports acute postpartum psychosis, Michael. And that's why they call it acute. It happens at a snap.
In a snap.
It's considered an emergency. And all of the things that she had described to her caregivers, her friends, her husband, were all precursors of acute postpartum psychosis. Yeah. So I think for her, she has a very strong case of non-criminal liability based on that fact. She was not properly diagnosed. She wasn't properly treated. She tried to check herself into a lockdown facility. They put her in group, put her on meds, and sent her home. We're not saying that she was insane and she couldn't have a coherent thought. Her thoughts were disconnected with reality.
Yeah.
So that's why she was able to do it when her husband wasn't home, because there were voices in her head telling her to do it, and she couldn't disconnect from that horrible reality that seemed so real to her. Yeah. That's what happened. It was like when I heard the prosecution's case today, as I leave it playing and I just hear testimony. If yes. I didn't know, I knew it was prosecution's case.
You would think it was the defense.
No, I would have said, oh my God, they allowed them to bring in character witnesses for Lindsay Clancy. That's what the entire testimony sounded like. And as far as their theory, that she fake attempted suicide and that her injuries were minor, that defense attorney killed it. Their own doctors killed it. We're talking about a person who coded, was intubated. The nurse described the lacerations to her wrist as 2.5 cms deep. That's an inch. You mean to tell me I'm going to cut 1 inch into my wrist? And they showed pictures of the cut on her neck from ear to...
They called them superficial in opening statements. They were superficial wounds.
Me.
I think that's problematic. And I was going to say, I think that's, there's a couple of ways that they've made huge missteps to prosecution.
Absolutely.
I think minimizing the idea that postpartum depression is, because they said this is not going to be a referendum on postpartum depression, when in fact it is, and that's all the defense is really focused on. And number two, downplaying these wounds and the things that she did to herself after this thing. They really just, they kind of dismissed it. And I get it, because she was supposed to be jumping out the second floor window. And instead of actually jumping, she kind of grabbed onto this piping on the side by the window and was kind of almost climbing down. And the fall was unfortunate and left her in the situation that she's in, paralyzed from the waist down. But I get making that claim, but man, the way they made it, I think it was so dismissive that I would find, especially when you hear the testimony of exactly what you're talking about, when you hear that and then you put that together with what they're saying in the beginning, like, how can I believe anything these prosecutors are saying, you know? Exactly. And then the motive is so weak. The motive is so weak. Oh, she was worried she wasn't going to be able to continue to take care of them the way she wanted to. And so when she was losing the nanny and she was losing the husband going to work, this is what caused her to do it. It's not adding up.
It is. I'm telling you, that attorney is so skilled with the cross-examination.
Reddington, yeah, he's the real deal.
I called him Ready Reddington, okay? Yeah, because he is ready for it. Let me tell you, he definitely read the record. At one point, they had a nurse who came in and said that when Lindsay Clancy emerged from being sedated and on the respirator, she asked for an attorney. And so they asked the nurse, was there police nearby, right? Was she being guarded? And the nurse said yes, but the police was outside of the door. Ready Reddington had the record, honey. Picked it up and said, is this you over here? Did you say police officer at bedside? So when you responded on direct that the police officers were outside the eyesight of Lindsay Clancy, that's not true, because your notes say police officer at bedside. So would it be unusual for you to emerge from sedation and becoming a little more alert and seeing that you're handcuffed? Was she handcuffed, by the way? She was, right? And the cop, now that you see your records, where was the cop? She said at the bedside.
Right.
So it's not shocking that I would wake up from what happened, a catastrophic.
Be handcuffed, see a cop. Hey, do I need a lawyer?
Say, should I get a lawyer? The cop is right there and I'm tied up.
And again, I think, it goes in line, like I said, defense needs to accept the fact that maybe she knew what she was doing, which is why she tried to commit suicide afterwards, right? Because she said, I had to do this thing because this voice was telling me I didn't really want to do it. I had to do it. And then, she obviously after she did it wanted to kill herself. Those things I think are very sort of, they match. I mean, those things match with your story. And to your point about Reddington, there was another witness. There was a doctor who came in to testify about medications and whatnot. I did a 140-page report. Now, I don't know if the prosecutors didn't read the report, but they did their direct examination, got what they wanted. Reddington got up and said, turn to page, 84 or whatever it was. On that page, she talks about the defendant has postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. Like, it was in the records. And she says, can you read your words, please? And she reads it. And I'm just like, come on, guys. Either you didn't read it, you missed it.
Disingenuous. And like you said, Michael, when you look at their opening statement, which is not evidence, but it shows you a roadmap where the theory of the prosecution's case is going. If they could look at those photographs that they presented and say that this was not a serious physical injury, they were superficial wounds inflicted to gain empathy and take away, deflect from the horrible act that she just did. Make it make sense. Come on, Michael, please.
Yeah, it was problematic. No question about it.
Shameful.
All right. So I think we both agree things are going fairly well
could go
under
either
the
way.
circumstances. And it certainly could go either way, because I think we can't underestimate the fact that, there are 3 children dead, and this jury may not like her, may want to hold someone responsible, and may feel that in order to do that, they need to hold her. Because quite frankly, at this point right now, in court, before and after, she looks fine. And they might say, you know what?
Though. She's
No, fine in terms of mentally. No, she's absolutely physically got issues. But mentally, the other day she talked in court. She's perfectly fine and there mentally. There are days where she looks kind of zoned out. I don't know if that's she's being medicated or whatever, but for the most part, she's there mentally. So they may look at her and say, you know what, this is not someone that we think needs to, who we are willing to say was insane at the time, because, children are dead and she looks fine. So there's always that specter, even no matter how well it goes for the defense.
There's always that spectrum, because I call this a prosecution to appease. And if she is convicted, it would be a conviction to appease, because of the horrific nature of this crime. Someone has to pay. And that's what human nature is. So even when they can't understand it, when you're talking about the lives of 3 little innocent children and the way they died, such a painful death.
Yeah. And, Chad Doerman, he's the guy that shot his 3 children on the front lawn, hunted them down, killed them. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, serving life in prison, or first-degree murder, serving life in prison. So, that's, when you think about a crime like this, that's what people think. You need to be going away for the rest of your life.
The separation, if I remember that correctly, you're so good with names. That guy had beef with his wife, the mother of the kids.
He did, but he also had very well-documented, better documented mental health issues with hallucinations, etc., than actually she had. I mean, he was diagnosed and had, medical records of having issues with voices and seeing things. So there was that whole mental health element. And I felt like, and I saw someone posted this online, how the system looks at women who kill their children and men who kill their children, or women who claim mental health issues, postpartum depression, and men who claim hallucinations and issues, mental health issues. It's a very different sort of thing. Much more sympathy for the woman than you see for the man. And, I don't know how it would have worked out in trial, but he didn't go to trial. He took the plea deal. I think, his guilt got the best of him, and he said, look, I'm going away. But at the end of the day,
I remember that case, and I did commentary on it, and you're absolutely right. I had no sympathy or empathy for him. I was like, it was spousal revenge that drove him to this filicide, and he needs to be held accountable. He chased the little kids down the block.
He did. It was ugly.
Snatched one from the mother's arms, and he only did that because she found herself a whole other man that didn't want him anymore. It was spousal revenge, diabolical. That's what I said.
Enough. I mean,
I didn't say that. You're right.
Certainly may have triggered it. Could have been part of it. I don't claim to know exactly, but I do know after he did it, he put the gun down, went and sat on the stoop and waited for the cops to come. And, crazy is as crazy does at the end of the day. All right, Marie, before we wrap it up, I want to get a quick update on what's happening with Haitians and the TPS status. I'm reading stuff about ankle monitors. I'm reading, stuff like that. So give me a quick update on what's happening in the Haitian community with the TPS status. Again, the president was given the ability to revoke TPS status for anyone who had it here in the States. It's under his auspices, can't be reviewed by courts, etc. And there were about 350 Haitians who were affected by it. So give me a quick update.
TPS Haiti sadly is over. The last necessary paperwork was completed by Judge Anna Reyes, who did her best to stop it from happening. She's the nurse. I'm saying she's the nurse. She's the judge. She's the judge who put the injunctions on. And because of the Supreme Court rulings, she could no longer do that. So it's over. TPS Haiti's over. People have started receiving letters to appear to ICE for check-ins. And there were reports, particularly in Ohio, that the TPS former recipients were reporting, and they were given ankle bracelets to monitor them until their next court dates and check-in dates.
So just by virtue of the fact that you are a TPS resident and that's been revoked, that we're not talking about people who they know are known criminals or have some issues. These are just regular folks. They're bringing them in, checking in, and they're putting ankle monitors on.
They're putting ankle monitors on selected few. I don't know what the criteria is, because there are options to supervision. To be clear, Michael, Congress gives immigration the authority to monitor non-citizens, particularly those with open cases, with removable orders, right? Orders of removal, or who have potential to be removed, right? They want to make sure when it's time for you to come to court, you come to court and they know where you are. It's a matter of national security. And this is not a new thing, the ankle monitor. They weren't, they didn't create this just for Haitian migrants. It's across the board. Could they have used smartphones for check-in? I've seen smartphones used. Could they have said, this is the date for you to come in, and you put your hands through something and they have fingerprint analysis? They could have done a variety of things other than use a bulky, visible, intimidating ankle bracelet, because when people see an ankle bracelet, they automatically think it's a criminal thing.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
And it's not.
What else could it be?
Immigration is a civil thing, not criminal. But a lot of people say that they did it on purpose, using the ankle monitor to discourage, intimidate, denigrate a person's morals, because, Haitian people, I'm from Haiti. We don't play about being associated with criminals, right? So the ankle monitor is something very degrading, and they're hoping that it makes a person just want to say, you know what, I'm going home. I'm self-deporting. I'm going to take them up on their offer to pay for my flight. This is ridiculous. I lost my job. Let's not forget that. Everybody lost their jobs because work permits are no longer valid. So even if you're the best worker who's been there for 16 years, okay, the employer had to let you go. And then, there's another thing brewing, which I personally didn't know, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't. I found out that in 2014, there was legislation enacted that allowed undocumented young people who graduated from high school to be able to attend college and pay regular tuition rates, right? Because they didn't want to make it impossible for young people who were brought here by their parents, like the Dreamers, to be penalized and not be able to attend university. So this was in 2014, and it was going fine until 2025. Governor DeSantis repealed that law and made it necessary for them to have to pay regular tuition, not in-state tuition, right? So that was fine. People came up with the money and they paid the extra rate. These are for public funded universities only, not private. So now everything was fine until June 30th, 2026, when the State Board of Education in Florida came up with a new rule, an administrative rule, that said, if you are not a lawful immigrant here, you cannot attend public funded 2-year college, 4-year college, or GED type programs. Nice. So it closed the door. It became not a situation of ability to pay. It was, we don't want you if you can't prove that you're lawfully here somehow.
Yes.
So if you had TPS, you were lawfully here, because TPS, contrary to everyone's belief, people that had TPS were here lawfully under TPS. Or if you were a lawful permanent resident, or if you came under some special visa, you were here normal.
So that law wouldn't apply to the people with TPS.
Right. So now that there's no TPS, these people cannot go to universities. Right?
Yes.
Now, In addition to this new rule, June 30th, 2026, they're trying to add another layer that says, and you know what? It shouldn't just apply to university, 2-year college, 4-year college, or GED programs. It should apply to trade schools too. As long as the trade school, you're talking about CNA schools, HVAC schools, mechanic school, electrician school, as long as it's a federally funded situation and you don't have papers, we don't want you in there either. So they shut the door to anybody who is undocumented to have any type of education. It matters in the Haitian TPS situation because in theory, before, if you had the money to pay for your school, illegal or undocumented or not, they would let you go. Now you can't put your foot in one of those state schools and universities if you don't have papers. It's a problem because there are people who've had TPS, let's say since 2010, and they came here with their 2-year-old son, right? Their son, 16 years later, is ready to go to college,
Yes.
right? The son, even if everybody's
So let me
illegal,
ask you this real quick. If you're a TPS, here on TPS, you had a child, that child's an American citizen though, is it? Or no?
If the child is here, I'm talking about if you came here with a 2-year-old
With
son.
the child. I got you.
Right. So your son went all through, grade school, junior high, and high school, and that was okay. But when it comes to university, your son no longer has the right to go because of this new legislation. They're targeting the immigration status as a condition to be admitted into a school, not your ability to pay. So it's just one more way they're squeezing you out to make it impossible for you to stay, because now it's not just your job impacted or your health insurance that your job gave you impacted. That's a whole other thing too. Imagine you have a cardiac condition, you're a TPS holder or were, and you work for a place and you had Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever it was, and they're paying for your medicine, your treatment, whatever it is, chemo. You don't have health care insurance anymore because you got fired. This thing is a catastrophic impact on the entire Haitian community.
Now, clearly, going back to Haiti seems like no option at all. Are you hearing from the community that they're going to maybe try to go to Canada, try to go somewhere else? Because clearly they may at some point have to go somewhere.
You know what? It's interesting that you should say that. I have an intern who used to work for me, whose name I'm going to keep private. He's a very smart young man. He came here on a student visa, and right around the time that the visa was expiring, they extended the TPS, and he was physically present in the country, and he was able to get TPS. He graduated from college. He has a master's, I think, in social work, and he was working for the Department of Human Services in Queens, and they let him go. They let him go. He also has a sister who has an accounting degree who was working for a big firm. They let her go too. And so I said, what are you guys going to do? They said that they're looking into getting a visa to go into Canada. Canada has a special program for workers who can prove their worth through the economy and the country. But he says it's very competitive. The smarter you are, the more you know, the more credentials you have, the better chance you have of getting in, because they want cream of the crop people. Yes. They want a person who could come in, contribute to the economy, contribute to the workforce, and engage in professions that are hard to find professionals in. So lucky for him, he does have a master's in social work, but even better for his cousin, his sister, who's an accountant. So if they're looking at both files, his sister may get in before him, because the need for—
I don't think there's enough accountants there. I mean, I know 100 of them myself.
But,
yeah. I mean, my wife's family, they live up in Canada, and I think half of them are accountants.
Well, that's the way, he explained.
But, it makes sense. I mean, and a lot of countries have that, stipulation. It's like you can come if you can prove that you have something to add to our economy, you have something to add to our country, and have some specialized skill, for instance, and,
Specialized skills.
PhDs, masters, things of that nature, make it a lot
Healthcare,
easier for you to get in.
people.
Yeah.
But this is
ugly.
what's happening. They're
It's
being
ugly.
assaulted from all spheres that people need to survive. You lose your job, you lose your health insurance, you're too scared to go to the hospital. They're telling you to self-deport. They're sending you notices to appear. They're forcing you to appear, and if you don't appear, it's worse for you. They're putting ankle monitors on you. They're surveilling you. You're literally afraid to go outside, and you have no job. Eventually, your landlord's going to come knocking on your door. The bank who owns your house is going to come knocking on your door. If you're on medications, you need money to buy medicine for food and everything. This is like the only hope. The only hope that is still left is if somehow the bill that Ayanna Pressley introduced, which went through Congress with bipartisan effort through the House of Representatives, it hasn't even been presented to the Senate floor by the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune. If by some miracle of God that it goes before the Senate and we could get the same or more bipartisan unionship to make the plan to give TPS for the next 3 years, it wouldn't solve the problem entirely, but it would give 3 years of breath and relief and perhaps an opportunity for new White House administration with a clean set of eyes and a different mindset on migration.
Truthfully, so much of the damage has been done. I mean, how do you reverse all these people who lost their jobs, lost the opportunity to go to schools? How do you even begin to reverse that? But anyway, thank you for giving us that update. Truly appreciate it, Marie. And again, we continue to pray for the folks who are under this, unfortunate situation and hope for the best for them. You always got to hope that the better angels of man will sort of win out under circumstances like this. I think this is one of those truly unfortunate and unfair situations, and somebody will step in. Like you said, maybe these senators will step up, somebody will step up and try to do the right thing here. But again, thank you so much for joining me today, Marie. Thanks to all of you for watching as well. Please don't forget, check us out on Substack as well as our YouTube channels. Marie, what do you got going that you would love people to check out? I know you got Instagram, you're doing some Ayala and TV stuff. Quickly let them know where they can find you.
Well, you could find me on Instagram at Marie Pereira. I am the legal analyst for Ayala and TV, so you can find me on my channel and on Ayala and TV network. And I'm also still the founder of Haiti Immigration Project, and we used to teach migrants how to fill out work permits and TPS applications. Now it's pretty much a moot point because there is no more TPS and no more work permits. So we're working towards getting donations. We're a 501c3 organization. We welcome the donations because we do have an emergency fund that we're trying to raise to assist people in crisis.
Even if GoFundMe or something? Like where can people go?
It's not a GoFundMe. It is, you go to www.hip.support Haiti Immigration Project, and there is a donate tab. And there is an emergency fund that I'm trying to raise money for people who are facing acute crises as a result of this. So let's say I need money to get my medications. I can't pay this month's rent. An emergency fund. Donate.
Fair enough. Yep, definitely donate, folks, because that's money that's going to, go to a good cause. And the folks administrating that, I know them well. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Truly appreciate it. I want you all to have a wonderful, wonderful day, and catch us again next week on Make It Make Sense with Mike.